Welcome back to Through the Veil podcast. I'm Camille.
I'm Elle.
This is the podcast where we seek to demystify, develop, and celebrate our spiritual gifts through a faith-based lens. And today we have Suzanne Greco with us.
Hello, Camille and Elle. It's great to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I found out about Suzanne. I was listening to a podcast called Listen, Learn, and Love. It's a podcast by Richard Ostler. I've been featured on the podcast about my story with grief. I listened to it casually. I was folding laundry and I was listening to Suzie's story, and it was very riveting. And I've spoken before on this podcast about my history of childhood sexual abuse. And so Suzanne was speaking on that same topic, but she started sharing these stories where she experienced miracles through the veil, interactions through the veil as she was in her healing journey. And I just thought, wow, this isn't a topic people usually openly discuss. And so for her to be so liberal with that was very affirming and just felt comfortable. So Suzanne, can you tell us, just start with whatever you feel prompted to, but I just want to hear more about your journey.
I am Suzanne Greco, and I am a survivor of early child sexual abuse by two men in my life, my Catholic grandfather and also my LDS father, who served as a bishop and also higher positions in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was a stay-at-home mom for 26 years. I then told about the abuse, which is typical. I had amnesia, came forward, and after that, my then husband was very abusive to me because I was now, considered less than, worthless, etc., etc. I can go down the whole list of things. And it took 10 years to get out of that abusive marriage in a safe way. Immediately after I got out of the abusive marriage, I started my studies at Harvard Divinity School, and then kind of being led by the ancestors and by divine hand, I started my PhD work, and I now study violence against women and girls and children in the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. I am now will be starting my last year in my PhD work. I am an author. When I was going through the abuse, I kind of sat in my room with the door closed, in the corner, sitting, writing. I'm not a writer. I had no words for the majority of my life. I just kind of watched people my whole life. So words were really difficult for me, but the voice was to write. So I wrote my book called The Stone Sphere, and you'll understand why in a little bit. Some of my academic work delves into the abuse, both on a personal level and institutional level, the second harm caused by my faith institution. And I delved into Jungian psychology and ancestral connections. And that was partly because of my studies at Harvard. I had an incredible teacher there who was just phenomenal and taught young. In most places, you're not going to get Jungian scholarship at all. So I'd like to begin kind of like with a map. And the map maker for me, for my life, began with what I believe is my divine parents. And I found profound similarities between the path for healing for me and also that Carl Jung lays out for healing. So Jungian is kind of a controversial person to study. And I'm speaking of the wounded young. Most people don't know Carl Jung was the victim of clergy sex abuse. He was sexually assaulted by someone who is meant to have incredible trust in spiritual authority, and someone that was very close to him. The wound never left him. In fact, he wrote that it is only the wounded physician who can heal. He said it is his own hurt that gives measure to the power to heal. So that idea was my first clue. My own healing journey began long before I ever read those words. For decades, I moved through life guided by dreams and visions and interactions with ancestors, which I didn't understand, but I felt compelled also to create. And that's kind of a Jungian thing. I created this massive 6-foot stone sphere out of stacked stone. And at the time, I just knew I needed to make it. It was only later when I found Jung that I understood the sphere or the circle was my unconscious crying out for wholeness. It was a symbol of my soul creating a whole self. And this is where I became relevant. The ego became real, right? I'm a survivor of clergy sex abuse. And what I found in my unconscious healing path that Jung had charted a century before, a path that modern psychology, for all its brilliance, often overlooks. So if you've experienced a betrayal that fractures not just your trust in a person, but in the sacred itself, what some call a moral injury or soul murder, you know the peculiar loneliness that it brings. You might have done the hard work of trying to heal, and yet part of you remains in exile, a spiritual part. So Judith Herman does incredible work in trauma, and that's been a lifeline for me. But Jennifer Wortham at Harvard is now highlighting there's a chasm when it comes to the spiritual wound. And this is where Jung comes in. Many religious leaders themselves feel unequipped to handle this level of betrayal. So where do you turn when the injury is your connection with the numinous and with the divine? And people often turn inward. And I argue it's going through it. And this is where we move from me to we. We live in a culture that has brilliantly dissected the mind and the body, but often treats the soul and metaphysics as abstractions. And you declared to say that the spiritual is psychological and the deepest psychological work is spiritual. He called it integration of the unconscious. So my research led me to ask, what if parts of that integration involves the most fundamental human connection of all, our ancestors? And we are not obviously the first to suffer. They probably suffered before we ever suffered.
Right.
And we're not the first to seek healing, to cry out for justice or to feel severed from the divine. So the veil between our world and what comes after, I believe, is thinner, and I think you guys know this, than we think. What I've experienced when I'm now studying is the potential for ancestral connection to be a metaphysical component of healing.
Right.
So in our church, we stress genealogical work, but I think we don't understand the dynamics of these interactions and how they really work. We limit them to a box of salvific ordinances, thinking that we have to be saviors for them. But I think it needs to be reversed, that they can be saviors for us in our healing in whatever shape or form that may take. So think of it this way. If a child abuse is a poison that works through relationships, a betrayal of sacred trust, then perhaps the antidote is obviously through relationships, not just living with therapists or support groups, but with relationships that transcend time, relationships with ancestors who have, in their own way, navigated in suffering and found peace. And they can become guides, witnesses, and sources of love that is no longer conditional or fallible, touching the deepest, most inner parts of our heart and soul when nothing else can. So I want to make it clear before I share some of my personal examples that I've never actually summoned spirits from the other side of the veil. Mm-hmm. I'm not familiar with that, but I've always tried to listen quietly and to be sensitive to that which is spiritual. And for me, it's been through knowing they are present After years of trauma, fragmented memory, and betrayal by the systems, by people I most trusted, I was pretty shattered. One night, after an hour of desperately praying, I lay in bed exhausted, tears blurring my vision, and then the veil parted for me. And I didn't ask for this. I wasn't expecting it. I saw a man walk through my bedroom door. It was my then former husband's brother who had passed away just a few weeks before. He came to my bedside. He didn't speak, but his presence was an unmistakable attempt to comfort me. And then he left. And I was wide awake, dumbfounded. Why him? He was the brother of my betrayer. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs writes that these divine intrusions happen when we are alone, afraid, and vulnerable, and close to despair. And I truly believe that. I'd been pushed off a cliff by my then former husband when I was in most need of support, and yet his deceased brother was offering me comfort. I was not alone, and this was the first of many visits to come. So this communion became a pattern. During another harrowing period, a brutal court interrogation where my integrity was attacked, I had a small victory. My lawyer helped expose a falsehood, and that same night I was again visited. This time it was my then former husband's sister, who had died as a child. She simply sat by my bedside, no words, just a silent witnessing presence. I had never met her before. I had only seen pictures of her, yet I knew exactly who she was when she came to me. So this might sound abstract, but for someone whose entire concept of love was twisted into pain, where to be chosen was to be hurt, this was the only kind of comfort I could tolerate at the time, meaning I couldn't bear human touch. When I needed was a love that was present, but was not physical. A love that could see me, but could not seize me. So I was building the map of my restoration, but a map sometimes also needs a guide. And sometimes those guides, they don't just come from the other side of the veil alone. Sometimes the veil grows thin right here in human encounters. And I think that's the work that you guys do. So this brings me to perhaps the most profound integration of all. I had an interview with a new church leader, President David Holland. He's the son of Jeffrey Holland. And I was wary. I was expecting judgment. And he began with questions, but then after I wasn't responding, he simply asked, "What's going on with you?" And when I told him about the abuse of my father, his entire demeanor changed. The formality fell away, and then he asked the standard temple interview questions. Is there anything in your conduct relating to members of your family that is not in harmony with the teachings of the church? And I broke down and I cried. I said, I have said things, I have done things, and I was drowning in guilt, a guilt I now see as a spiritual parasite, a demon that had clung to me since childhood. And he looked at me for a long time and paused and then asked, "Are you trying?" "Yes," I said, "I am trying." And there was another long pause. And then he said with quiet authority, "That is good enough." Those words, "that is good enough." If you have ever felt shattered by a guilt that wasn't yours to carry, a guilt placed on you by the abuser, by a betrayal, by a religion that failed you, you know the weight of it. It's soul sickness. And in that moment, I didn't just hear President Holland. I heard the same voice that had spoken to me years before on a snowy hill when I felt I was failing as a mother. God was speaking through him. It was a direct divine message of absolution using a human conduit. Then President Holland did something else. He asked if he could give me a blessing. And I was terrified. His hands would have to touch my head. And yet my heart said, yes, let him. In that blessing, two things happened that changed everything. First, he said, there were legions of angels on the other side of the veil who had their hopes in me. The ancestors weren't just comforting me, they were invested in my healing, in my future. Wow, that changed how I looked at things entirely. Second, he cast out the demon of guilt. Okay, so I've never had anything like that happen to me before. I wasn't looking for an exorcism.
Well, and you didn't even tell him. You didn't say,
No,
hey, I have a demon of guilt. I just sensed it. I just figured out what it is. I just had this aha moment. It was like this beautiful, he just had the discernment to know.
Right. Yeah, there's this two-way connection, right? And I felt this presence leave me. And scholar Eric Huntsman writes that Christ's most frequent miracle was casting out demons,
right,
accepting their reality. So this was my exorcism. The guilt that had fused with my identity was severed. And so this experience fused everything back together for me in a way. My personal wound and cry for help, the legions of angels holding hope for me. Why did they care anything about me? And a morally good man acting as a clear channel for divine grace. He wasn't a perfect priest. He was a human who, in a moment of authentic encounter, became a bridge. And as Alfred Edersheim wrote of such ministry, it offered unspeakable comfort to the soul's deepest needs. I can't tell you what healing that brought me. So this is the full picture of healing through the veil. It's not about rejecting humanity for the spirit world. It's about collaboration between them. Our ancestors hold hope for us, and sometimes God sends a living person, flawed, unprepared, but willing to be the hands that perform the surgery on the soul, to speak the words that cut the chains.
But what we miss the most in these kinds of things, and by miss, I mean that like what we overlook the most is the connectedness that we have, which is what you're speaking to. That it's not all about your story and it's not all about their story. These things have to go hand in hand. No one can be saved alone. They have to be present together. And we forget that while we're here. There is a veil, there is a forgetfulness, there is a lack of deeper understanding and perspective, which has to be. It has to be in order for life to function in the way that it needs to function, for us to grow and learn the things that we need to grow and learn for our progression. But not everyone's forgotten that. And those legions of angels are about everywhere doing that work because they remember and they fill the gaps that we have forgotten exist. Even earthside, there is a structure, there's an organization to the work of heaven that you're speaking to, and we're all a part of it. And all that is necessary to become a part of that is a willingness to participate. Elder Holland, President Holland, he was willing to participate. He was living his life in such a way that he could step in as a channel in that moment and participate in that connection that we all have and we all share. And it is like life altering for you, right? Just that choice, that single choice to be present and to be worthy of being prepared. And by worthy, I mean spiritually prepared to step into that call, that role can change the course of someone's life as we need to. It's an earthside angel. They're everywhere. And hand in hand, it goes hand in hand with the work of heaven around us all the time.
That's what I wanted to point out is that collaboration that Susie mentioned, because these are not concepts that are at odds with each other. They work together. The angels on the other side can inspire humans here to have the right words, to have that softened heart, to have that opened perspective, to know what to say so that healing can happen here for you. The spiritual and the religious worlds do not have to compete or conflict. They can collaborate and work together. They should collaborate.
That's I think the ultimate design. As you were sharing that story and you said that there were long pauses, I was like, oh, I know exactly what was happening. He was listening. He was paying attention. Mm-hmm. It's a shift in that attention and that awareness. That's what he was doing. He was paying attention. And when we stop and we pause and pay attention, we can collaborate with heaven. We're being asked to collaborate with heaven, right? It's us that usually miss it. It's just on our shoulders that we need to develop that awareness.
I went to the temple to work in the temple, and I was down in the baptistry, and there's a Chinese sister there and her son, and they're not new converts. And they were there to perform baptisms for the deceased. And President Baird had called me down, and he handed me the list of names that they were going to do. And they were my then abusive husband's Italian ancestors from Italy, whose names I had submitted for their work to be done. After the baptisms, the sister grabbed my hand and she said, after I was baptized for the third sister, I heard a woman's voice. She said, tell her that we love her. They want you to know that they love you. So this stranger, a Chinese sister and a temple font, became another clear channel. The message wasn't just for me. It transformed her. It transformed everyone that was working in the baptistry that night. And this is where healing through the veil becomes a communal act. It's not always a solitary hidden mysticism. It's love that pierces through and changes everything it touches. I was going through so much in abuse and so much pain. And this receiver, the messenger, the witnesses became another lifeline. And the ancestors weren't just comforting me privately. They were declaring their love in the house of God through a joyful new believer. And this was a public affirmation of a private bond that I had with these people, which is just so amazing to me. So alongside these human and angelic messengers, God began speaking to me directly, not in visions, but in audible words. And I've only had this happen a few times. And the first time, I feel like it was a divine ancestor speaking to me. I was sitting on my fireplace alone and praying for help. Once again, this is just like a saga that I'm going through. And I heard a voice say to me, and it felt like this riddle, that which has split you apart will bring you back together. And the first thing I thought was, okay, my marriage is going to be okay. Somehow things are going to be brought back together. But that never made sense. It wasn't what was playing out. And it took me a couple of years to actually figure out what the message was. And it really was that which has shattered you, abuse, will bring you back together. And I didn't understand that because now that I'm working for abuse victims and in this abuse, I am being brought back together in a way I never thought possible. And then later, another time, I'm once again sitting near the fireplace, posed with impossible odds, and I hear a different voice this time. And this one was more powerful. And it said, just let him go, Susie. I will set you free. So I knew what that meant. I was to let my former husband go. This is time for the release, and God is going to set me free. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be set free. Hallelujah. Finally, my day of deliverance is going to come. How is this going to happen? I was asking questions. Okay, don't go away. Stay there. Tell me how this is going to happen. And yet it's silent, right? And I want so much more. But I have this hope, this incredible hope that my life is going to change, right? In a way that I've never felt before. So this is the promise I so longed for, spoken to me by what I believe to be my divine Father. And it's a destination Jung saw in his quest for the Holy Grail. It's the answer to soul murder. It's like the full arc of healing. I was not alone. I was so suicidal at so many times. And it was these interactions beyond the veil that saved my life. And I can't even today explain why weren't they my ancestors? Or maybe they are my ancestors and I don't get it yet. Like why?
Can I speak to that just for a minute?
Yeah, tell me, explain.
Because I've been turning this over because you talked about it when you first mentioned the very first encounter you had with your brother-in-law, where he came through, and you were like, "Why him?" I just kind of was like, I'm not surprised. I'm very interested. Heaven will often work these ways, and it's because healing is bigger. It's bigger than just us, and so are the acts of damage. They're bigger than just us as well. And there is this understanding, because our perspectives are so small, so foreshortened, and so limited here. We often don't see the consequences of our actions or other people's actions, or the greater picture of everything, of heaven, the spectrum, the scope, the scale that everything plays out on, right? And it's so interconnected. I'm so glad I'm not God, because what a headache. Like, the spider web and a spider web and a spider web of all these interacting actions and interactions that we have as human beings. Healing is a complicated process, and often it's not just ours alone. It was your husband's process too. And you are connected with him, even you consider, like, loosely, even with a damaged relationship, a highly broken, volatile, and violent relationship, right? And yet his ancestors see a bigger picture. So his loved ones, his brother, his sister, they may see him in a way that he no longer can see himself right now, in a way that you at the moment can't see him either, because he's occluded by choices, by circumstances, by addictions, by who knows, but the mortality that clings to us and breaks the divine nature of our eternal souls. And they see the possibility of what could happen. And they see that in you as well. The beauty of what makes you, the beauty of what you started with, the seeds of a union that you had the potential at the beginning that became broken over time with entropy, right? With human choice. Yeah. And that matters. They see to the core of that, because they don't have the physical restrictions and limitations that we have right now. They just see us. And everyone is so broken, but everyone also deserves to find the light and have the full healing that comes with redemption, with grace, with coming to that potential that we all have, because we all have this eternal nature.
Because they were saving my life in the coming years, I founded the nonprofit Italian Parish Records, which is to save and preserve and make accessible all of the parish records in Italy. And it was because I started that. I'd been working on my former husband's Italian genealogy for 20 some odd years, and I knew these people in and out. But then when they were saving my life, literally, as I've told you, it then shifted to all of the names in Italy. They need to be saved. And it became this bigger project. And I would not have done that if they had not been reaching out to me like they did. And now we're slowly moving forward. We still have tons and tons of work to do, but we have people all over the world supporting us in this work because they want to find the names of their ancestors too, in Italy. Italy's such a big country, but yes, that makes sense what you're saying. The love that they poured out into me is now by me being poured out for them.
Right.
Even though he's your ex-husband now and there's no relationship, he still has a healing journey to do of repentance and accountability and understanding why he did certain things and decisions that he made. If he doesn't do that on this side of the veil and do his healing work, you've done your healing work, you're doing your healing work here. If he chooses to put that off and does it later on the other side, his family will be there invested in his healing journey there. We can't put it off forever. He has his agency. He may not be doing much work here to heal. But they can, if he's not, then they can at least throw their love into you because they are invested, right?
Right.
It's so weird to think about. You would think they would just be invested in him and his healing, and
that's not how it works.
He learns
this is so big, right? It's so beyond what you normally think.
It's like quantum physics theory of entanglement. We are all entangled. And because you are healed and you are progressing, this frees him, whether he knows it or not, to also move forward. He has to make the choices to do that here. But someday he'll see that. And so will all of them. Your healing here impacts all of them, as did his poor choices here impact all of them. And that entanglement stretches, that grace, it grows outward along all of those threads that connect all of us. And when someone experiences grace, all of us experience grace.
Yeah.
Why would we not want that?
Yeah, you guys are opening up so many doors to understanding for me that I haven't been able to, make sense of. So I think this is so cool. Yeah. I don't believe that we are meant to be isolated. Yet I know for abuse victims, especially sexual abuse, makes you isolated. I think that opened the door for me at a very young age to find connection through the veil, because I didn't have connection in real time.
Something really interesting to point out here, which has come up thematically a couple of times in your story, with answers are given, but they're not always complete. They're usually not complete. In fact, it's when they come with more, that's the rare glimpse of a moment that we can get. Usually, it's to give us hope. And when you really sit and think about that, it's not surprising that that is the point, because a life without hope is nothing. We must have hope. It is the foundational growth experience to anything enlightening, anything transformative, right? Without hope, there's nothing. And so these moments come at just the right time to give us hope to push forward, because the story's not done. There's still yet more.
There was nothing else that could, I think, give me hope. And these were different types of encounters through different people at different times, that I truly believe that was the form of hope I needed at that time. That would be most effective to help me, as you said, keep going. Because I was in a position where hope was long gone. Nothing. This was just gonna be hell I knew for a long time going forward, because I had been a stay-at-home mom. This was like the perfect storm. I'm tied to the abuser. How am I gonna get out? No one believes what's going on. The scenario is just beyond belief, and I have children that I care about, and how are we going to do this? And I was completely hopeless, because I could not see a way out that would be okay, other than to take my own life, and then I could be absolved from all the pain and the things that would happen. And I needed strong medicine. The wounds were so deep. And they countered it with that. And I really believe it was the only thing that saved my life.
I think here too, it's worth voicing that lots of people feel like they never get that. And that is a really hard thing, especially when you're a believer of the possibility of these kinds of things occurring, right? What about that person who says, why was I never saved? Why did I never see angels? Why did I never get, those things? And I think there's a lot, I can't speak to surety about why this occurs, and the details for the planning of why in each individual life it's so different. The spectrum of human experience is broad and vast, wide and deep. But I think some of it has to do with being blocked in loss and grief and pain. Hope is the spark, the beginning of faith. It is the beginning of light. And we have to hold on and latch on to that. And I think you said strong medicine, right? We have to be open to strong medicine for it to first occur. And sometimes when we're in that grief, that betrayal, that pain, that anger, that bitterness, the bitter cup, it can be really hard to see heaven. Sometimes we need somebody else to tell us that those little tiny notions that we get and we overlook so frequently, the tiny nudges or tiny inspirations or even thoughts where we're like, I don't want to think that thought. I'm still angry about this, right? I can't give grace. Don't ask me that. Those kinds of things. Sometimes we need validation for those. And sometimes that has to come from outside of us for us to have the courage and the faith to believe that that is what that is. It's like the more miracles that you notice, the more miracles are there, because they really always were there. It was just what you were looking at and how you were looking at it.
And I can guarantee that we miss most of the miracles. I'm sure that every time Susie needed someone to reach out and to help meet her in her woundedness, there wasn't always a miracle, but there were enough to keep pushing her along. Because it's easy, in hindsight to look back and say, well, these are the highlights. These are the highlight moments. We don't always have a highlight moment. I can remember back when I was really starting to, I guess, kind of come out of my own amnesia about my childhood sexual abuse in my early 20s. There was a lot of frustration, and there were times when I would go on long drives and I was frustrated about other things too. It wasn't just this, it was just like life, but I didn't know what to do with all these big feelings. And so I would literally just go out in my car and just yell at the top of my lungs, like this scream. And sometimes I was mad, and I was mad at God, and I would yell and I would say, where are you right now? And sometimes, most when I'm yelling, I'm not usually having these like miraculous angel moments, but sometimes I would have this thought like, you need to calm down. You're not going to get what you want because you're so angry. And maybe in those moments, there was a miracle where somehow I get distracted and I start thinking about something else. And I'm like, well, I guess I could go get frozen yogurt. That sounds good. I'm tired of this yelling. Like, maybe the miracle was that I got distracted long enough to just leave that situation because it was destructive and I wasn't getting anywhere. Maybe it wasn't like flood of light filling my heart, filling my car. Maybe it was just enough to push me to the next moment. And maybe next time there would be more of a highlight moment that could push me even further. I think more often than not, we are just getting through, and then enough we have those moments to push us through so we can keep going. But I think it's just a long, tedious hike sometimes, and that's just the reality.
I am grateful for every last episode that's ever been gifted to me. And I do feel that they are gifts, truly gifts. And I'm not sure why I've had so many gifts. All I know is that I've always been just so grateful, just intensely grateful and so touched. And, other people, like you said, who don't have them, I'm not sure why, but I will just forever be indebted to all, I don't know, for every episode. It just feels, like it, like, at Christmas time when you unwrap the most incredible present ever, it doesn't even compare to that. It's something that touches your soul. It writes on your heart so that you can never forget it. It's etched into you now. And these relationships are endearing now in ways that were never before. It's just so intense, right?
I think you, Susie, and the work that you do now, reaching out to those other people because of your healing and because of the experiences that you've had, whether or not they also get those clear, recognizable, distinguishable moments with heaven, those moments can also still come through you. And so, kind of to circle back to where we began, like when you're willing to pause and sit with clarity and be that outreach of heaven, you then act for heaven in ways that can change other people's lives as well. That inspiration comes full circle.
I find it so true. I'm still moving through in ways I hadn't anticipated, expected, whatever. And I'm sure it's going to continue in that way as I keep journeying on through all of this.
I think we could go deep in our own theology. So in our own Latter-day Saint context, we have a strong belief that the nature of the soul doesn't just exist forward, but it also exists backward. So we have existed. We have had an existence before coming to this mortal life, right? And then we will have that existence that will continue to evolve and continue to grow after this life, right? Which to various degrees is shared in various ways in other Christian denominations also, and also non-Christian denominations too. But personally, from my experience, what I've frequently seen in doing this work for, a decade is that there were things that we were aware we were signing up for before coming here. And I will often joke with people, I'm like, did we know we were standing in that line? We're like, that sounds like a good thing. I guess I'll try that. I could probably handle that. Yeah, pretty good. Like, I can take it. It's like, well, it didn't come with a strong enough warning label. Like, where was the FDA in heaven? Like, advising caution on what we were signing up for, right? But the thing about life is that I honestly at this point don't believe we came in blind. And there were structures kind of set up, but so much of it, and there are support structures that are there and accessible to us. And so much of it really relies on what we're going to do with the experience. I often will think of like Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning. And I don't know if there's an experience we can compare to the Holocaust, right? To a concentration camp, what terror and horrors and the stripping of humanity that was experienced. I mean, there are probably other things throughout history that were similar. War is terrible in all of its senses, but what comes out of that on the other side with retrospect, what comes out of that with choice on what you're going to do with the circumstance that you've been through, how you're going to approach it, how you're going to handle it for you and for other people. That's what defines it. It's not the moment that you're in that defines the moment. It happened. Very Buddhist. It happened. Okay. There's no taking it back. What changes that actual event is what you do with that event, what you do with yourself coming out of that event. And what you do with yourself coming out of that event affects other people also. Mm-hmm. And so we really do believe in this knowledge of, in this idea of like, all things will work together for your good. Well, when you are aligned with heaven, it doesn't matter if you went through the Holocaust, all things will work together for the good and the benefit of your soul. And if you do it right, not just your soul, but the souls of so many people who also touch you on both sides of the veil.
Yeah.
On both sides of the veil.
Are you guys familiar with the myth of Philocrates at all?
Mm-mm.
No.
So Philocrates is, and I may not say all the names right, but he's on this island and he's bit by a snake and he's got this festering wound, and all the men, they need to go to war and they decide we're going to leave him. You know, he's useless, even though he's got this magic bow that would be really great and helpful in the war. They just abandon him. So they abandon him and they go off to fight in Troy for, you know, I don't know how many years, but a long time. And they are not winning the war. And Philocrates, his wound isn't healing. He's on the island and just feeling resentment for having been abandoned, you know, wounded and abandoned. And then the guys off at war at Troy, because they're not making any progress, a voice comes to, I forget who the leader is, but a voice comes to him and says, you need to go back and get Philocrates. He's got his magic bow and he can help you win the war. And so they go back and they try to say, hey, we need you to help this war. And he says, no way, man. You guys left me. I've been ailing alone for all of these years and you want me to rejoin you? Like, there is no way under heaven I am going with you. And they beg and he won't go, and he hears a higher voice, and I forget who it is, but he tells him, this God tells him, if you go and you help with the war, you will be healed. And so he relents and he goes and he fights in the war, and they all win and they conquer. But it was only together. They have to bring the wounded man back to the war to win. And I had read that early on. I've had a lot of resentment on all of this, which is natural.
Right.
And I had to look past that and say, in order... And I'm not saying I'm Philocrates or whatever, I don't have the magic bow, but in order to help fight the war, I am a survivor who can help. And I can be a testimony and a witness to a lot of things. And it took a lot. It took a divine voice to say, Susie, get your butt in the game. Go get in the game. And that changed everything for me. It literally changed everything for me.
Well, because it's such a puzzle, and they can see it, we can't, and we just sometimes have to just act out of faith and do what we're told to do, not understanding why or how it's going to fit into the big picture later, it's not usually for one reason. There's usually a multi-layered. And the longer the more time has passed, we can look back and see, oh, this wasn't just about this, it was about this and that as well. And so the impact is compounded.
Yeah, and on both sides too, right? I mean, I know in a lot of religious organizations, they want nothing to do with survivors. They see us as just like baggage and damaged goods, and I'm not going to go on and on and on about the stigmas, right? But they need us. They need us in there. We're the canaries in the coal mine that can help them understand the toxic poisons and the things that are going on that can make a safer environment to help heal communities, especially in the LDS Church, who has a problem with child sexual abuse and they're not addressing it. And they need the canaries in the coal mine to listen to their songs before we're all still birds, because we journey together as a community, right?
Well, this has been a good conversation. Thank you so much, Susie, for coming on. Thank you for being willing to open up your heart, your stories that maybe you haven't shared publicly before, some of them, and share those vulnerable things, because I know there's going to be people that can relate to being a survivor of abuse, feeling like their voice was silenced, or they don't know what to do with all of this damage, and they'll find hope, I think, in your story. They'll find companionship in your story. So thank you so much for coming on and being so vulnerable and so honest with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you, Camille, and thank you, Elle, for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I do love to talk about this stuff. I do. I love miracles. I love ancestors. I love anything through the veil. I absolutely love this stuff. So I think it's so cool that you guys have this platform where you can actually talk about it, and it's okay.
I know. So we're working on mending the two worlds. Where spirituality and religion meet. So yes, if you guys want to find out more about Susie, where can they go?
They can go to my author page. It's called thestonessphere.com. And my book is there. It gives an introduction about me and my speaking and my academic work, some of my writings. There's all kind of information there. So that'd be great.
Awesome. And if you guys want more information about our podcast, go to throughtheveilpodcast.com. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Please leave us a review, share our podcast with your friends. We're also hosting an in-person workshop in September on the 19th. It's a Saturday in Salt Lake City area. We will be discussing how the world of Christianity, particularly in the LDS faith, does work well with these spiritual gifts, how they overlap so well. So that'll be a cool opportunity. You can go to our website to get more information on that, throughtheveilpodcast.com. That's also where you can get information from Elle's website, my website, schedule a session, sign up for a class. All of that is there.
Thanks, everybody. We will see you next time.
Bye.